I'm not trying to fight. I just want peace in my own home." Miriam said the words softly, almost like an apology, but no one answered her. Daniel, her husband, did not look up from his phone. His mother, Evelyn, only smiled in that calm, careful way that always made Miriam feel small, as if she had said something wrong without knowing why. Daniel's parents had arrived early that morning, and from the moment they stepped into the house, the air had changed. The home was warm, clean, filled with the sounds of children and the smell of food, yet something tight wrapped itself around Miriam's chest. She felt it every time Evelyn watched her move, every time her eyes followed Miriam's hands as she served tea or corrected the children. "You let your son, Lucas, talk too much," Evelyn said lightly, her voice gentle. "Children need firm control. Don't you think, Daniel?" Daniel nodded without hesitation. "Yes, she's too soft sometimes." The words were simple, but they landed heavily inside Miriam. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She told herself it was not worth it. It never was. Throughout the day, the comments continued about the way Miriam spoke to the children, about how she cooked, about how tired she looked. Each remark was wrapped in kindness, but the meaning underneath was sharp and clear. "You are failing. You are the problem." Miriam had heard this tone before, especially since she started working a few hours a day at the community center. It was only part-time, just enough to fit between school drop-offs and pickups, just enough to remind her that she existed outside the house. But Evelyn often mentioned it with quiet disapproval, asking why a mother needed work when her children already had a home. Daniel echoed it later, suggesting she was distracted, that her place should be fully with the family. Miriam never explained that the job made her feel useful, steady, alive again. She simply absorbed the judgment, adding it to the growing list of things she was apparently doing wrong. Miriam noticed how Daniel changed around them. He laughed more with his parents. He corrected Miriam in front of them. When she tried to explain herself, he sighed, as if she was making things difficult on purpose. And that's how their marriage life has been. Her in-laws complaining about everything she does, and her husband indulging them. "You're overreacting," he said quietly at one point. "They're just trying to help." Help. The word stayed with her, heavy and bitter. By evening, Miriam felt exhausted, even though she had barely spoken. She moved through the house quietly, cleaning, smiling when expected, nodding when spoken to. She felt like a guest in her own life. When Daniel's parents finally left, the house became quiet, but not peaceful. Daniel went to bed without saying much. Miriam followed later, her body heavy, her heart even heavier. In the bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. She tried to remember when she had stopped speaking freely, when she had learned to swallow her thoughts before they became words. She remembered who she used to be, confident, expressive, sure of herself. That woman felt far away now, like someone she had once known. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not wipe them away. She felt tired of hiding, even from herself. She stood and walked into her children's room. Lucas and Nora slept peacefully, their small bodies relaxed, unaware of the quiet war around them. Miriam knelt beside the bed and gently touched Lucas's hair, then Nora's cheek. "I don't want you to grow up like this," she whispered. That night, as Miriam turned off the light and closed the door, she realized something that scared her more than conflict ever had. If she stayed, she would lose herself completely. Episode 2, Blood Before Vows. Daniel, I don't think I can stay married like this anymore. Miriam said the words slowly, carefully, as if saying them too loudly might break something fragile that was already cracked. It was the morning after his parents' visit. Sunlight filled the room, but she felt cold inside. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her fingers stiff despite the warmth around them. Daniel looked at her, confused rather than upset. "What do you mean by like this?" he asked, as though the answer should be simple. "I mean feeling alone even when I'm not," Miriam replied. "I mean waking up every day trying to be smaller so no one complains. I mean never feeling good enough, no matter how hard I try." Daniel sighed and rubbed his face. "You're tired," he said. "Everyone gets tired." "This isn't just tired," she said quietly. "I feel invisible. When your parents speak to me like I'm failing, you don't stop them. When I try to explain myself, you say I'm overreacting. I don't feel like your wife anymore. I feel like a problem you're managing." Daniel stood up and began pacing. "They're my parents, Miriam. They care about this family." "Then why does it feel like I'm constantly being judged?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay calm. "Why does everything I do feel wrong? Even my job. Even how I raise our children." "They just think the kids should come first," Daniel replied. "They are first," Miriam said, her voice firmer now. "But I matter too. I am still a person." Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her. "So now you want to walk away because things are uncomfortable?" "I want help," Miriam said. "I want counseling. I want us to talk to someone before I lose myself completely." Daniel shook his head slowly. "This is exactly what I mean. You always take things too far." Miriam swallowed hard. "I'm telling you I'm hurting." "And I'm telling you you're being dramatic," Daniel replied. "My parents warned me about this." Her heart dropped. "You talked to them already?" Daniel grabbed his keys from the table. "I need to clear my head." "So you're leaving?" she asked softly. "I can't have this conversation right now," he said, already walking toward the door. Miriam stood up. "Daniel, please. I'm not threatening you. I'm asking you to see me or we get a divorce." He paused for a moment, his hand resting on the door handle. Then he turned away. "I'll talk to my parents," he said. "They'll know what to do." The door closed behind him, leaving Miriam standing alone, her words still hanging in the air, unanswered. That same evening, Daniel drove straight to his parents' house. When he arrived, Evelyn noticed his expression immediately. She did not ask what he had done wrong. She asked what Miriam had done this time. Daniel sat heavily on the couch, his voice tight as he spoke. "She says she wants a divorce." Evelyn gasped softly, pressing a hand to her chest. "After everything you've done for her?" she said. "After we welcomed her into this family?" Richard shook his head slowly. "Marriage is not something you walk away from because things feel uncomfortable," he said. "Family must stick together." Evelyn leaned closer to Daniel, lowering her voice. "I've noticed for a long time that Miriam is not grateful," she continued gently. "She isolates herself. She refuses advice. And now she wants to destroy her home? That's not stable behavior." The word stable stayed with Daniel. He had never thought of Miriam that way before, but now it felt possible. Evelyn spoke with calm certainty, as if she were protecting him from danger. "She's trying to turn you against your own family," Evelyn added. "A good wife doesn't do that." Daniel did not defend Miriam. He listened. Every complaint felt familiar now, even ones he had never fully named. Richard supported each point, reminding him of duty, loyalty, and endurance. By the time Daniel stood to leave, his confusion had hardened. He no longer felt unsure. He felt betrayed. When he returned home later that night, Miriam looked up at him with tired hope in her eyes. She searched his face for warmth, for reassurance that her honesty had mattered. Daniel gave her none of it. "So," he said coldly, "you think divorce is the answer now?" Miriam stood slowly. "I think we need help," she said. "I think I'm disappearing, and I'm scared of who I'm becoming." Daniel crossed his arms. "My parents think you're being dramatic," he said. "They think you don't appreciate this family." The words struck Miriam like a quiet slap. She realized then that she was no longer speaking to her husband alone. She was speaking to his parents through him. "I didn't ask for their opinion," she whispered. Daniel turned away. "That's the problem," he replied. "You never do." That night, they slept on the same bed, but miles apart. Miriam stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy with fear and regret, wondering if honesty had only made things worse, never knowing that Daniel had already chosen a side, and that soon he would make a choice that would change everything. Episode 3, The Day They Didn't Come Back. "Please don't keep them too long. They get scared at night without me." Miriam said the words gently as she helped Lucas put on his shoes, forcing a smile she did not feel. Daniel stood near the door, calm and distant, holding Nora in his arms. He said it was just a weekend visit to his parents, nothing more. He was simply giving her time to rest and sort out her feelings. His voice was steady, almost kind, but his eyes stayed closed to her fear. "They'll be fine," Daniel replied. "You worry too much." Miriam kissed the children's cheeks again and again, breathing in their familiar scent, holding them a second longer than usual. Something inside her tightened, but she pushed it away. She did not want another argument. She watched them leave, standing at the doorway until the car disappeared. The house fell quiet immediately. At first, Miriam tried to stay busy. She washed dishes that were already clean. She folded clothes slowly, carefully, as if time might stretch if she moved gently enough. She checked her phone again and again. No messages, no calls. By evening, panic settled deep in her chest. She called Daniel. No answer. She sent a message asking to speak to the children. It was read. Still nothing. When her phone finally buzzed, the message was short and cold. "The kids will be staying with me for now. Stop calling. I've sent the divorce papers." Miriam felt the room tilt. She tried calling immediately, but the call did not go through. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. She grabbed her bag and keys without thinking. Daniel's parents' house felt far away and too close at the same time. When she arrived, her heart raced with hope and fear. She knocked once, then again. The door opened only halfway. Evelyn stood there blocking the entrance. "I need to see my children," Miriam said, her voice breaking despite her effort to stay calm. "Please, just for a moment." Evelyn's face stayed calm, polite, cold. "This is not a good time." "I'm their mother," Miriam said. "They're scared. They don't understand what's happening." Richard appeared behind Evelyn. "You've chosen not to be part of this family," he said firmly. "You want independence? You can't have it both ways." "I never said I didn't want my family," Miriam replied. "I just asked for respect." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "A mother who truly puts her children first doesn't walk away," she said. "They need stability, not confusion." I didn't walk away from them, Miriam said desperately. You took them. Evelyn's voice hardened. Lower your voice. You're upsetting everyone. Miriam tried to step forward, but Evelyn closed the door further, leaving only a narrow space between them. Please, Miriam whispered. Let me see them. You should leave, Richard said. This isn't helping. Miriam stood there for a moment longer, listening for her children's voices that never came. Then she turned away. The drive home felt endless. When she reached her house, the silence swallowed her whole. She walked into the children's room and saw their untouched beds, their toys waiting. Miriam sank to the living room floor, her back against the couch, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Daniel had not just taken the children, he had taken away her place in their lives. And as the night closed in around her, Miriam understood that nothing would ever be the same again, and that whatever came next would require more strength than she had ever known. Episode 4. Silenced. I didn't abandon my children. They were taken from me. Miriam's voice shook as she said the words, her hands gripping the edge of the chair as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. Saying it out loud made the situation feel more real, more frightening. Across from her, the lawyer listened carefully, her expression calm but serious, already flipping through a thin folder on her desk. Miriam tried to explain everything at once. How Daniel had promised it was only a weekend visit, how her calls went unanswered, how one short message had changed her life overnight, how she had gone to her in-laws' house and had not been allowed past the door even as she begged to see her children. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully, afraid that one wrong sentence might make her sound unstable. The lawyer nodded, then gently placed a document in front of her. Daniel has already filed a request, she said. He claims the children need emotional stability right now. Miriam's chest tightened. Stability? She repeated quietly. They've never been without me. I put them to bed every night. I know what scares them. I believe you, the lawyer said softly. But the court looks at two things very closely: access and provision. She paused, letting the words settle. Daniel's filing also points out that he has a steady income and housing, the lawyer continued, and that you are currently working part-time. Miriam felt the air leave her lungs. I work when the children are at school, she said quickly. I've always been there for them. I know, the lawyer replied. But on paper, limited income can be used against you, not because you are a bad mother, but because the system often mistakes money for stability. Miriam stared at the document. Daniel's words were written neatly, calmly, as if he were a careful, responsible father. There was no mention of blocked calls, no mention of unanswered messages, no mention of how frightened the children might be without her. Miriam learned then that the divorce was not finished, not even close. Asking for a divorce did not end a marriage. It only opened a long and painful process. Daniel had used that uncertainty to act first, filing for temporary custody under the claim of concern, knowing the system would move slowly. What had started as a request for separation had turned into an emergency fight for her children. The lawyer asked for Miriam's phone. Together, they scrolled through the call history, missed calls, messages marked as read but never answered, attempts made late at night and early in the morning. Miriam swallowed hard. So because he doesn't answer, she asked, it looks like I stopped trying? In some cases, the lawyer replied, yes. The weight of it settled heavily in Miriam's chest. It was not just her marriage being rewritten. It was her motherhood, measured, questioned, reduced to numbers and documents. "So what do I do?" Miriam asked quietly. The lawyer slid another document toward her. "We respond," she said. "We document everything, and we work on strengthening your financial position. This case will turn on whether the court believes you can provide stability on your own." Miriam looked at the pages in front of her. Signing them meant accepting that love was not enough, that she now had to prove her worth as a mother in income and paperwork. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. She thought of her children's empty beds, of their voices missing from her home, of how quickly silence had erased her place in their lives. Then she signed. As she stood to leave, the lawyer spoke again. "Be prepared," she said gently. "This will be hard, but it is not hopeless." Miriam walked out of the office with the papers pressed to her chest, fear tightening around her heart. Daniel had not only taken her children, he had turned survival itself into a weapon. And now, Miriam knew exactly what she had to fight for next. Episode 5. A Smaller Room. "I'll be fine. I just need to learn how to breathe in a smaller space." Miriam whispered the words to herself as she stepped into the small apartment, holding a box filled with clothes she barely recognized as her own anymore. This place was not chosen with hope or excitement. It was chosen because it was all she could manage on her own. After Daniel took the children and turned cold, the family house became impossible to stay in. The bills were too heavy for her small salary, and the silence there felt sharp, like a reminder that she no longer belonged. She could have asked Daniel to keep paying his share. He would have agreed, then reminded her of it every time they spoke. He would have had opinions, control, power. Miriam did not want that. She did not want to depend on him again, not even financially. So she packed what she could carry and left before pride turned into another chain. Sarah stood beside her, setting down a box carefully. Sarah was more than a friend. She had known Miriam long before the marriage, before the slow fading. She was the one who noticed when Miriam stopped laughing easily, the one who listened without fixing, without judging. When others told Miriam to endure, Sarah had said gently, "You deserve peace too." "You don't have to explain anything to me," Sarah said softly, looking around the apartment. "You did what you had to do." Miriam smiled faintly. "I keep wondering if I stayed too long," she admitted. They unpacked slowly. Sarah placed plates into a small cabinet and folded clothes into a narrow wardrobe. She talked about ordinary things, traffic, work, small plans, filling the silence just enough. Miriam nodded, but her thoughts drifted back to the home she had left behind. At one point, Sarah picked up a small toy car from a box. "Lucas must have missed this," she said quietly. Miriam's chest tightened. She turned away, pretending to search for a lamp. "He always hides his toys," she replied, her voice thin. Sarah said nothing and placed the toy carefully on a shelf, as if it mattered. When Sarah left, the quiet returned. Miriam leaned against the door, pressing her forehead to the wood. The apartment felt empty, but it did not feel hostile. It did not ask her to prove anything. That night, Miriam sat on the floor with her laptop, listing expenses: rent, food, transport, legal fees. Her salary barely reached the end of the list. She crossed out small comforts without hesitation. Survival came first. When she lay down to sleep, the bed felt too narrow. Her arms missed the weight of Nora curled beside her. She missed Lucas's late-night questions. Tears came quietly, the way she had learned to cry. In the days that followed, Miriam learned new routines: smaller meals, longer walks, quieter mornings. Each change hurt, but each one proved something important. She was still standing. One evening, she found an old family photo and placed it face down in a drawer. That chapter was closed. Episode 6. The Man Who Waited. I promise I won't cause any trouble. I just really need to work full-time. Miriam said the words softly, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she sat across from the community program coordinator, Ethan, in the small office at the community center. Her voice carried fear she tried hard to hide. Ethan listened without interrupting. He did not look at his watch. He did not sigh. He simply waited until she finished speaking. I've been working part-time, Miriam continued carefully, but my situation has changed. I need something more stable. I can commit. I just need the chance. Ethan nodded slowly. You're already doing the work, he said gently. Wanting stability doesn't make you difficult. Those words settled deep in Miriam's chest. We can make this full-time, Ethan added. It won't be easy, but I trust you. Miriam swallowed hard, her eyes burning. Thank you, she whispered. The work itself was simple but steady. Filing papers, answering phones, helping organize small programs for families who came through the center's doors looking tired and hopeful at the same time. Miriam focused carefully, grateful for the quiet sense of purpose the job gave her. Still, every vibration of her phone made her tense. Fear had trained her to stay alert. During a slow moment in the afternoon, her phone buzzed again. This time, she looked. The message was from Daniel. You moved without telling me. That won't look good for you. Remember, I decide when you see the kids. Miriam's breath caught. Her hands began to shake as the words sank in. It was not just a message. It was a reminder, a threat wrapped in calm language, proof that even distance had not loosened his grip. Her vision blurred. Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. She turned away embarrassed, ashamed of breaking down at work. Ethan noticed. He did not ask questions. He simply stood and quietly closed the office door, giving her privacy without making a scene. You don't have to explain, he said softly. Take your time. Miriam pressed a hand to her mouth, forcing herself to breathe. No one had ever given her space like this before, space without judgment. I'm sorry, she said after a moment. I don't usually... You don't have to apologize for being human, Ethan replied. Those words stayed with her. When the day ended, Miriam packed her bag slowly. She felt exhausted, but not ashamed. As she walked out of the community center, something shifted inside her. Ethan had not tried to control the situation. He had not asked her to justify her pain. He had simply offered safety. That night, alone in her apartment, Miriam read Daniel's message again. This time, she did not cry. She saved it. She took a screenshot. She placed the phone face down beside her. For the first time, she thought about preparing instead of reacting. As she turned off the light, one truth settled quietly in her mind. Daniel still believed he had control, but Miriam was beginning to build something stronger. Episode 7. Their version of the truth. Please don't confuse them. They need their mother, not lessons. Miriam's voice played softly from Daniel's phone, a message he had not answered. He lowered the volume and placed the phone face down on the table as if her words were something unpleasant that needed to be hidden. Evelyn noticed the movement and gave a small, satisfied smile. That tone again? Evelyn said calmly. Always emotional. Always trying to make you feel guilty. Daniel leaned back on the couch. She knows the hearing is coming, he replied. She's trying to soften me." His father cleared his throat from his chair. "Marriage is endurance," he said firmly. "A wife's duty is to stay, even when it's hard. Walking away is selfish." Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. And now she wants to break the family and still demand access to the children? That's not how it works." Lucas sat on the rug with Nora, pushing a toy car back and forth. He looked up suddenly, his eyes searching the room. "Daddy," he asked quietly, "when will Mommy come?" Daniel hesitated for only a moment. "Soon," he said flatly. The words sounded empty, even to himself. Nora moved closer to Lucas. "She sings to me at night," she whispered. Evelyn stood quickly. "Children should not be filling their heads with confusion," she said sharply. "They need structure, not constant attachment." Daniel nodded again, as if agreeing made the ache in his chest easier to ignore. Evelyn walked toward him and lowered her voice. "You must be firm during the hearing," she instructed. "Say Miriam is unstable. Say the separation was necessary for the children's emotional safety. Judges understand that language." Daniel swallowed. "And if she agrees to stay married?" he asked. Evelyn's eyes hardened. "Then she can see the children," she replied. "If she withdraws the divorce, we can talk. Until then, she must learn consequences." Lucas stood suddenly. "I don't like it here," he said, his small voice shaking. "I want Mommy." Daniel stood up too quickly. "Enough," he said. "Go to your room." The children obeyed, their shoulders slumped, their questions unanswered. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "You see," she said, "she has already damaged them." Daniel said nothing, but inside him something twisted. He told himself this was necessary. He told himself control was protection. He repeated his parents' words until they sounded like the truth. Episode 8. Almost Loving Again. "I'm scared that if I choose again, I'll choose wrong." Miriam said the words quietly, her fingers wrapped around the warm cup as if it were something solid she could lean on. The fear behind them surprised even her. Weeks had passed since she started working full-time at the community center, and in that time, her life had found a fragile rhythm. She woke early, worked long hours, and went home to a quiet apartment that still felt unfinished. The divorce process dragged on slowly, heavy and uncertain, and the custody battle remained unresolved. Every day felt like waiting for calls, for messages, for news about her children. Ethan sat across from her in the cafe, listening in the same steady way he always had. They had worked together at the center for years, crossing paths during programs and meetings, sharing polite conversations and quiet smiles. Tonight felt different. "I like spending time with you," Ethan said gently. "And I was wondering if you'd like to do this again, maybe as a date." The word date made Miriam's chest tighten. She looked down at her cup, watching the steam rise and disappear. For a brief moment, she considered letting him believe she was free, uncomplicated, ready. It would have been easier. But she was tired of hiding. "There's something you don't know," she said softly. Ethan did not rush her. He waited. "I'm not fully divorced," Miriam continued. "I asked for it, but it's still going on. And my children, my husband took them. He says it's temporary, but he's made it very hard for me to see them." The words came slowly at first, then spilled more freely. She told him about the silence, the legal meetings, and about leaving her home. "I didn't want you to think I was lying," she said. "I just didn't know how to say it." Ethan's expression softened, not with pity, but with something deeper. "I've known for a long time that you weren't happy," he said carefully. "Not because you said it, but because I could see how much you carried." Miriam looked up, surprised. "I've liked you for years," Ethan continued quietly. "I never crossed a line. You were married. I respected that. But when I heard you were divorcing, I hoped, carefully, that maybe one day you'd see me differently." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "I don't want to rush you," he added. "I'm not here to take advantage of what you're going through. I just wanted you to know the truth." Something warm spread through Miriam's chest. Not excitement, not romance. Something steadier. Relief. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt safe instead of heavy. Ethan reached across the table without thinking, his hand hovering near hers. Then he stopped himself. "I don't want to rush you," he repeated gently. That pause meant more to Miriam than any promise ever had. She smiled, small but real, feeling seen without being pressured. When they stood to leave, Miriam felt lighter than she had in weeks. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because someone had seen her whole story and still stayed. As she walked home later, her phone vibrated in her bag. Her heart skipped as she checked it. A message from her lawyer appeared on the screen. "The court date has been moved up. We need to meet tomorrow." Miriam stopped walking, the warmth of the cafe fading behind her. Just when she had allowed herself to feel almost safe, reality reached for her again, and she knew the next day would ask even more of her strength than the last. Episode 9. The Hearing. "I am not here to win. I am here to tell the truth." Miriam's voice did not shake when she spoke, even though her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the table in front of her. Today was the court hearing, and she had repeated the sentence many times in her mind before walking into the courtroom, holding on to it like a quiet promise to herself. Whatever happened today, she would not disappear again. Daniel sat across the room with his parents beside him. Evelyn's posture was straight and confident, her face calm, as if she already knew how this would end. Richard leaned back slightly, his arms crossed, watching everything with the certainty of someone who believed the world worked best when everyone stayed in their assigned place. When Daniel was asked to speak, he did exactly what he had been coached to do. He talked about stability. He talked about concern. He repeated words that sounded responsible and caring, but felt empty to Miriam as she listened. "My children need routine," Daniel said. "They need protection from emotional conflict." Evelyn nodded gently, as if she were the one being wronged. Then it was Miriam's turn. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. For a brief moment, fear rose in her chest. Then she thought of Lucas asking for her, of Nora crying at night, of the silence that had almost broken her. She spoke calmly. "I have never refused cooperation," Miriam said. "I have only asked for access to my children." Her lawyer presented phone records, messages marked as read but unanswered, calls made late at night, early in the morning, again and again. "These messages," Miriam continued, "are not emotional outbursts. They are a mother asking to hear her children's voices." Daniel shifted in his seat. Miriam did not look at him. "My children have always lived with me," she said. "I know their fears. I know their routines. I know when they are quiet because they are tired, and when they are quiet because they are hurting." The room felt still. When the topic of the children's behavior was raised, the court acknowledged their distress, their confusion, their repeated questions about their mother. Miriam felt something change then. The air shifted. The story being told was no longer only Daniel's. She was not presented as perfect. She was presented as present, as consistent, as loving. When the judge finally spoke, Miriam's heart raced. The decision was measured, careful, but clear. Temporary arrangements would change. Communication would no longer be blocked. Safeguards would be put in place. It was not everything, but it was enough to breathe again. As the session ended, Evelyn's confident calm cracked for just a moment. Daniel avoided Miriam's eyes. Miriam gathered her things quietly. She did not feel victorious. She felt steady. Outside the courtroom, her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You think this is over?" Miriam stared at the words, her pulse quickening. She knew then that the hearing had shifted the balance, but the fight for her children and her future was not finished yet. Episode 10. What Remains? "You're home now. Mommy's here." Miriam said the words slowly as Lucas and Nora stepped into the apartment, their small hands clutching overnight bags that looked too heavy for them. Daniel had brought them and left immediately without saying a thing. For a brief second, they stood still, as if unsure whether this place truly belonged to them. Then Nora ran forward and wrapped her arms around Miriam's legs, holding on tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. Miriam knelt and pulled both children close. She breathed them in, the familiar warmth, the weight she had missed more than words could ever explain. The court order lay folded on the table behind her, its pages worn already from how many times Miriam had read them. It was clear and firm. The children would live with her full time. She had primary custody, with full authority over their daily care, schooling, and medical decisions. Daniel was granted limited, scheduled visitation. The children would not be taken without notice. They would not disappear again. Miriam no longer had to beg or explain herself to see her own children. The court order also addressed what Daniel had avoided for months. He was required to provide monthly child support. The payments were scheduled automatically, not dependent on Miriam's cooperation or silence. It was no longer something he could use to negotiate access or obedience. Evelyn had not spoken to Miriam after the ruling. She walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, and Richard followed behind her. That evening, the apartment came alive. Lucas explored every corner. Nora lined her toys carefully along the couch. Laughter returned, hesitant at first, then fuller. Miriam cooked a simple meal, watching them eat, watching their shoulders relax. The space was still small, but it no longer felt empty. Later, when the children were asleep, Miriam stood in the doorway of their room, listening to their soft breathing. Peace settled over her slowly, like something earned. A knock came at the door. Miriam opened it to find Ethan standing there, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes warm but careful. He did not step inside right away. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said gently. "No pressure." Miriam looked back toward the children's room, then returned her gaze to him. She saw patience there and a smile. She stepped aside and opened the door wider. "You can come in," she said. Ethan entered quietly, as if honoring the space. They sat together, not too close, not too far. Miriam told him the children were home for good now. She told him about the boundaries in place and was happy everything worked out. Ethan listened, the same way he always had. "You didn't survive this," he said softly. "You faced it." Miriam smiled, feeling the truth of it settle inside her. That night, after Ethan left, Miriam returned to the children's room. For the first time in a long while, her body relaxed without fear following close behind. As Miriam turned off the light and closed the door, her phone vibrated in her hand. Miriam looked down, her heart pausing for just a moment before she read the message. It was from Ethan. "Can we go on a date now?" She felt something warm rise in her chest.